52 years ago, at this very point in the world's longest mountain range, a plane collided head-on with the mountain. The surprising thing was that the plane immediately disappeared somewhere after the collision. This is the 8,900-kilometer-long Andes mountain range, where 15,000 feet high mountains and nothing is found except unbearable cold and silence. When neither the wreckage of the plane nor any dead bodies were found for several days, authorities eventually declared the search operation closed, while the news media buzzed with the crash for a few days. But everything slowly started getting back to normal. Exactly 72 days later, authorities received a message from the missing plane. It was the Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571. This flight is renowned for a real-life miracle that registered its name in history. On 12 October 1972, this flight took off from Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay. On board were the rugby players heading towards Chile's capital, Santiago. A total of 40 passengers, including rugby players, and 5 crew members were present. After takeoff, the plane had just reached Argentina when, due to sudden bad weather, they had to land in Mendoza. The captain made this decision because between the Argentina and Chile, the highest Andes mountain range stands like a wall. The high mountains here are quite dangerous, and passing over them in bad weather was not a sensible decision. The pilot's plan was to spend one night in Mendoza, and then the next day, the Andes Mountains were to be crossed. But how did the pilot and all the passengers know what trouble was going to befall them? On the next day, Flight 571 took off from Mendoza. Their destination is only 180 kilometers away. But in these 180 kilometers, around 15,000 feet high peaks of Andes Mountains were present. The planned route of the flight was the plane would go to the south of Mendoza, then gain its height, and after reaching Planchon Pass, it would turn towards the Andes and cross these dangerous mountains. The pilot of Flight 571 had completed about 50 flights on this route, so he was automatically confident. As soon as the plane took off from Mendoza, it headed south as per the plan. While the plane was gaining height, the pilot noticed that a thick layer of clouds had hidden the entire view. He connected with the control tower, which would keep him informed about his location. Apart from the control tower, pilots can also estimate their location in another way. In this scenario, by estimating the direction and distance traveled, pilots can find their location without any help. This method known as dead reckoning in aviation language. Upon reaching parallel to Planchon Pass, Flight 571 took a right turn and is now in the Andes mountain range at an altitude of 18,000 feet. The pilot heavily relied on the Santiago Air Traffic Control Tower. Upon approaching Planchon Pass, Flight 571 vanished from the control tower's radar due to weak signals. Because of this, the co-pilot used dead reckoning to calculate their location. Although the usual time to reach Curacao from Planchon Pass is 11 minutes, but they covered the distance in just 3 minutes, which seems quite impossible. Actually, the co-pilot's calculated location was completely inaccurate. The pilot believes they were over Curacao, but the plane was actually crossing Planchon Pass. Flight 571 was not showing on the radar of control tower, so they had no idea that the co-pilot's calculated location was wrong. And that's why the control tower gave permission to descend the aircraft. The pilot started reducing the height of the plane and made the right turn. Initially, they were facing dangerous turbulence, and when they crossed the layer of white clouds, what they saw was that a huge mountain was standing in front of them. At this point, the pilot realized that in reality, the flight was still in the Andes Mountains. The pilot tried his best to gain altitude again, but unfortunately, the tail of Flight 571 hit the top of the mountain and separated from the plane. Due to the crash, 12 passengers died on the spot. Remaining passengers were stuck in the Andes at an altitude of 11,500 feet, where the temperature was minus 30 degrees Celsius. As far as they could see, they could only see snow-covered mountains. The news of the plane crash had alerted the Chilean authorities, but they did not know that flight actually crashed in Argentina. Without wasting any time, they initiated the operation in which 4 airplanes took part. While searching the suspected area from morning till evening, they neither saw any plane nor any debris. It was a very difficult operation because all the mountains below were covered with snow. Uruguay and Argentina also took part in this search operation, and now a total of 11 aircraft spent the whole day searching for Flight 571. Rescue planes passed several times over the passengers remaining on the crash site, but the rescue planes could not see them. After running the search operation for a total of 6 days, it was stopped by declaring all the passengers dead, and the passengers who were at accident site were hoping that authorities would come to help them. In the first week after the crash, 5 more passengers lost their lives due to injuries. Now only 28 passengers were left at the crash site. They just had 8 chocolate bars, 3 jam jars, some dry fruits, and a few bottles of water. For the first week, they ate this food with great difficulty by dividing it among themselves. But when all these things were finished, they started eating clothes and cotton. Due to this, everyone started falling ill. They could not find anything for energy in this part of the Andes, and it was not easy to descend from the ridge on which they had crashed. When they could not understand anything, they started eating the body parts of their dead companions. This decision was very difficult, but hunger forced them to take this step. On October 29, around 17 days after the crash, an avalanche suddenly came at night in which 9 survivors were killed. As days went on, the survivor situation got worse. Each day, someone else was nearing death, and those left were just waiting for it to happen. But 60 days after the plane crash, on December 12, 3 more survivors passed away. Now only 16 people left. Basically, they faced 2 choices. Start a daring hike up a steep cliff to the west or continue counting their remaining days. On that day, 3 rugby players embarked on a difficult journey to hike Western Peak. After 3 challenging days of hiking, they reached the mountain's highest point, only to discover more snow-covered mountains on the other side. With no greenery and limited food, 1 person returned to the crash site, while other 2 descended the opposite side in search of help. Over the next 10 days, and continue 61 kilometers of trekking, they reached a valley with greenery and a river. Suddenly, they encountered a man on a horse across the river, but could not communicate due to the noise of water. They wrote their story on paper, wrapped it around a stone, and threw it across the river. The message reached local authorities, who initially found it hard to believe survivors still existed after 2.5 months. Authorities directed 3 helicopters to the crash site on December 27. Even the pilots were astonished by the rugby players' feat without proper gear or experience. All survivors were rescued, and a large grave was dug for their died companions. A stone placed atop the grave served as a lasting memorial. Share your thoughts about this incident in comment section, and subscribe our channel for more informative content.